I never expected to see Jesus. I'm Muslim. We honor him as a prophet, Isa ibn Maryam, peace be upon him, but we don't worship him as Christians do. We don't pray to him or expect him to appear to us in visions. That's not how Islam works. But on the night of August 15th, 2023, exhausted after 18 straight hours dealing with a security crisis in the northern provinces, I collapsed into bed still wearing my uniform. And that's when it happened. I found myself standing in a place I'd never seen before. It wasn't quite a room, wasn't quite outdoors, somewhere in between, filled with a light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The air felt thick with presence, with meaning, like the moment before a storm breaks. And then I saw him. I knew immediately who he was, though I can't explain how. He didn't match any of the European paintings I'd seen, no pale skin, no flowing robes, no glowing halo. He looked Middle Eastern, weathered by sun and wind, with calloused hands and eyes that held an impossible depth. He wore simple clothing, dusty from travel, and when he looked at me, I felt simultaneously exposed and completely known. "Ibrahim," he said, and his voice was both gentle and commanding, like water and like thunder. I wanted to prostrate, to show respect as we're taught to do before prophets, but before I could move, he gestured for me to remain standing. "We don't have much time," he said. "There's something you need to understand. Something I came to warn you about." My heart was racing. This had to be a dream. I'm Muslim. Jesus doesn't visit Muslims in dreams. This isn't how revelation works in our tradition. But it felt more real than waking life. The ground beneath my feet felt solid. The air moving across my face felt genuine. His presence felt undeniable. "I don't understand," I managed to say. "Why would you come to me? I'm not even Christian. I honor you as a prophet, yes, but—" "That's exactly why," he interrupted, and there was something like sadness in his voice. "Because those who claim my name have forgotten what I actually taught. Because Christians worship me but don't follow me. Because Muslims honor me but don't understand what I came to do. And because you, Ibrahim Traoré, are about to make a decision that will determine the fate of thousands of people." He gestured, and suddenly we were no longer in that strange in-between place. We were standing on a hill overlooking a city. I recognized it as Ouagadougou, my capital. But something was wrong. Smoke rose from multiple points. I could hear gunfire in the distance. People were running through streets in panic. "What is this?" I asked. "When is this?" "6 months from now," Jesus said, "if you choose wrong." The scene shifted. Now we were inside what looked like a command center. I saw myself older, harder, sitting at a desk making decisions. But my eyes looked empty, dead. I was signing orders without reading them, authorizing actions without questioning them. I'd become the very thing I'd fought against, a leader who'd lost his soul to power. "This is what happens when you forget why you took power," Jesus said, "when you start believing that maintaining control is more important than serving people. When security becomes more important than justice. When you become willing to do anything to stay in power." I began. "Everyone says that," he cut me off. "Every leader who's ever become a tyrant started by believing they were different, that they were special, that they could hold power without being corrupted by it. But power changes people, Ibrahim. It whispers to you. It tells you that you're indispensable, that only you can save your country, that any action is justified if it keeps you in control." The scene shifted again. This time I saw a prison, people being tortured, families separated, dissidents disappearing in the night. And I saw myself authorizing it, justifying it, telling myself it was necessary for national security. "No," I said, shaking my head violently. "I would never do this. I took power to free Burkina Faso from exactly this kind of oppression. I would die before I became—" "Would you?" Jesus asked, and his eyes pierced through me. "Or would you tell yourself that you're different? That you're not torturing innocent people, just enemies of the state? That you're not oppressing your people, just maintaining order? That's what they all tell themselves, Ibrahim. Traoré told himself that. Sankara's killers told themselves that. Every dictator in history has believed they were the exception." I felt sick, not just from the images he was showing me, but from the recognition that he was right. I could already feel the pull of power, the temptation to believe I was indispensable, the voice that whispered I needed to be strong, to be firm, to not show weakness. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "What do you want from me?" Jesus looked at me with an expression I can only describe as profound compassion mixed with urgency. "I came to warn you about 3 things," he said, "3 temptations that will come to you in the months ahead. 3 moments where you'll have to choose between the path of power and the path of service. If you choose wrong even once, you'll start down the road you just saw. If you choose right all 3 times, you might avoid becoming what you most fear." He raised his hand and 3 images appeared in the air between us, shimmering like mirages. "The first temptation will come from your allies," he said, pointing to the first image. I saw myself in a meeting with military officers, men who'd supported my coup. They were urging me to take stronger action against perceived enemies, to arrest opposition leaders, to crack down on protests, to consolidate power before resistance could organize. They'll tell you it's necessary, Jesus said, that you can't afford to be soft, that mercy is weakness, that you need to strike hard and fast to secure your position. They'll use the language of security and stability, but what they're really telling you is to choose fear over faith, control over trust, domination over service. When this moment comes, and it will come within weeks, you must refuse. You must remember why you took power, not to dominate, but to serve, not to control, but to liberate, not to instill fear, but to restore dignity. But what if they're right? I asked. What if showing mercy gives my enemies time to organize, to strike back, to undo everything we've worked for? Then you lose while trying to do right, Jesus said simply, which is better than winning while doing wrong. I was executed as a failed revolutionary, Ibrahim. I lost by every worldly measure, but I stayed faithful to my mission. You must do the same, even if it costs you everything. He pointed to the second image. This one showed me meeting with foreign powers, France, the United States, China. They were offering deals, support, recognition, but with conditions attached. Conditions that would compromise Burkina Faso's sovereignty, that would give them influence over our resources, that would turn me from revolutionary into collaborator. The second temptation will come disguised as pragmatism, Jesus explained. They'll tell you that you need their support to survive, to develop your economy, to provide for your people. They'll offer you money, weapons, legitimacy. But in exchange, they'll want your soul. They'll want you to abandon the principles you fought for. They'll want to turn you into another client, another puppet, another African leader who talks revolution but practices collaboration. When this moment comes, you must remember, no amount of development is worth selling your people's dignity. No amount of aid is worth surrendering your sovereignty. No amount of recognition is worth compromising your mission. Better to be poor and free than comfortable and colonized. But my people need development, I protested. They need schools, hospitals, infrastructure. If refusing foreign help means they continue suffering. There are always conditions, Jesus interrupted. Always. But there's a difference between partnership and subjugation, between cooperation and colonization. You'll know the difference by what they ask you to give up. If they ask you to compromise your principles, your sovereignty, your people's dignity, walk away. Find another path. Trust that God will provide. That's what faith means. He pointed to the third image. This one was more subtle. It showed me alone in my office, late at night, facing a decision about someone close to me, a friend, an ally who'd been with me from the beginning. They'd been accused of corruption, of betraying the revolution, and I had to choose. Protect them because of our personal relationship, or hold them accountable because of our principles. The third temptation will be the hardest, Jesus said quietly, because it will come from love, from loyalty, from the bonds of friendship and shared struggle. Someone you trust will betray the cause, and you'll have to choose between personal loyalty and principled leadership. Everyone will tell you that loyalty matters, that you can't abandon someone who fought beside you, that one mistake shouldn't destroy a relationship, and they're right, in personal life. But you're not living a purely personal life anymore. You're a leader. Your choices affect millions. And if you protect corruption to preserve loyalty, you've already lost. You've shown that relationships matter more than principles, that power protects its own, that the revolution was never real. When this moment comes, and it will come, probably within a year, you must choose justice over friendship. You must hold your allies to the same standards you hold your enemies. You must be willing to lose people you love, to preserve principles you believe in. I felt the weight of all three warnings crushing down on me. How do I do this? I asked desperately. How do I navigate these temptations without becoming either a tyrant or a fool? Jesus looked at me with those impossibly deep eyes. By remembering what I actually taught, he said. Not what Christians have made of my teachings, not what's comfortable or safe, but what I actually said and did. He began to speak, and his words felt like they were being carved into my mind. I taught that the first shall be last and the last shall be first. That whoever would be great must be servant of all, that you judge a tree by its fruit, not by its claims, that you can't serve both God and money, both truth and power, both justice and domination. I taught that blessed are the poor, the mourning, the meek, the hungry for justice, that woe to the rich, the comfortable, the powerful, that whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me. I taught that you love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, turn the other cheek. Not because weakness is virtue, but because responding to violence with violence, to hatred with hatred, perpetuates the very cycles you're trying to break. I taught that the kingdom of God is not about power over others, but about service to others. Not about being served, but about serving. Not about accumulation, but about distribution. These aren't suggestions, Ibrahim. These aren't ideals for some perfect world that doesn't exist. These are the only teachings that can break the cycles of oppression and violence that have trapped humanity for millennia. And they require everything. They cost everything. They demand that you be willing to lose everything rather than betray them. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentler but no less intense. I'm not telling you this to burden you. I'm telling you because you asked for this. You prayed for guidance, for strength to lead rightly. This is my answer. These are the warnings you need. These are the principles you must hold to. But I'll fail, I said, feeling the weight of impossibility. I'm human. I'm weak. I'll make mistakes. I'll fall short. Yes, you will, Jesus agreed. Everyone does. The question isn't whether you'll fail, but whether you'll recognize your failures and correct them. Whether you'll stay humble enough to admit error. Whether you'll be willing to change course when you've gone wrong. The difference between a good leader and a tyrant isn't that one never makes mistakes. It's that one admits mistakes and corrects them, while the other justifies mistakes and doubles down on them. Stay teachable, Ibrahim. Stay humble. Stay willing to be wrong. That's how you avoid the path I showed you. The scene around us began to fade. I could feel myself being pulled back toward waking, back toward my body lying exhausted in bed. Wait, I called out. How do I know this was real? How do I know I didn't just dream this because of stress or exhaustion? Jesus smiled the first time I'd seen him smile in the whole encounter. Does it matter? He asked. If the warnings are true, if the teachings are real, if the path I've shown you is right, does it matter whether this came from outside or inside your own heart? Truth is truth, regardless of its source. But when you wake, he continued, you'll have a sign. You'll know this was more than just a stress dream. You'll receive a message within 24 hours from someone you don't expect about something you couldn't have predicted. And that message will confirm what I've told you tonight. Watch for it. And then he was gone, and the light was fading, and I was falling through darkness back toward my sleeping body. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, my heart hammering in my chest. I looked at my watch. It was 3:47 a.m. I'd been asleep for less than 2 hours, but I felt like I'd lived through days in that dream. I got up, paced my room, tried to process what had just happened. Was it real? Was Jesus actually warning me? Or was my subconscious mind, stressed and exhausted, generating warnings I already knew I needed? I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't ignore what I'd seen. Whether the source was divine or psychological, the warnings were real. The temptations were real. The path to tyranny was real. And I had to decide, right then, whether I would heed those warnings or dismiss them as just a dream. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I prayed, I paced, I wrote down everything I could remember from the dream. Every detail, every warning, every word Jesus had spoken. I filled pages of my journal with notes, trying to capture it all before the details faded the way dreams usually do. But they didn't fade. If anything, the dream became clearer, more vivid as time passed. That's not how normal dreams work. By morning, I was exhausted but clear-headed. I had meetings scheduled, decisions to make, the usual chaos of leading a country that was still finding its footing after a revolution. I went through the motions, but part of my mind was somewhere else, watching for the sign Jesus had promised. 24 hours, he'd said, a message from someone I didn't expect, about something I couldn't have predicted. The day passed. Meetings, briefings, decisions about security, economy, infrastructure. Nothing unusual happened, no unexpected messages. By evening, I was starting to wonder if I'd imagined that part, or misunderstood it, or if the whole thing really had been just a stress dream after all. Then, at 11:43 p.m., less than an hour before the 24-hour deadline, my phone rang. It was my personal phone, the one only a handful of people had the number to. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, from France. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Captain Traore? The voice was elderly, speaking French with an African accent I couldn't quite place. Speaking, who is this? My name is Father Emanuel Ntakarutamana. I'm a Catholic priest. You don't know me, but I knew Thomas Sankara. I was his spiritual advisor during the last years of his life. I sat up straight. Sankara, my hero, the revolutionary president of Burkina Faso, who'd been assassinated in 1987, the man whose vision I was trying to fulfill. How did you get this number? I asked. That's not important, Father Emanuel said. What's important is what I need to tell you. I had a dream last night, a vision. Jesus appeared to me and Captain. I'm 83 years old. I've been a priest for 60 years. I've never had anything like this happen before. But he appeared to me and told me I needed to call you, that you'd had a dream too, that you'd been given warnings, and that I needed to confirm them. My hands started shaking. What did he tell you to say? He told me to remind you of 3 things, Father Emanuel said, and I could hear emotion in his voice. First, Sankara stayed faithful to his principles and they killed him for it. But his legacy lived on, his influence grew, his example inspired generations. He lost in the moment, but won in history. You face the same choice, win by compromising, or lose while staying faithful. Choose faithfully. Second, Sankara refused foreign interference even when it cost him support, even when it made his work harder. He insisted on Burkinabe solutions to Burkinabe problems. He was right. Don't surrender what he died protecting. Third, Sankara held his own people accountable when they betrayed the revolution. Even his friends, even his allies. That's why the revolution stayed clean as long as he lived. When he died and others protected the corrupt, everything he built crumbled. Don't make that mistake. I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. These were the exact warnings from my dream, the exact 3 temptations. Spoken by a man I'd never met, who had no way of knowing about my dream, calling me at the last possible minute before Jesus' promised 24 hours expired. How is this possible? I whispered. I don't know, Father Emanuel admitted, but Captain, I believe God is trying to tell you something, through Jesus, through me, through whatever means necessary. You're at a crossroads. The path you choose in the coming months will determine not just your fate, but the fate of thousands, maybe millions of people. I'm just trying to serve my country, I said, to free us from exploitation and corruption, to give Burkinabe people dignity. I know, Father Emanuel said gently. That's what Sankara tried too, and he succeeded for a while. But the forces of corruption and exploitation are patient. They work slowly. They use your own people against you. They corrupt from within, and they especially target your greatest strengths, your loyalty, your desire to help your people, your willingness to be pragmatic. What should I do? I asked. Follow the warnings you were given, he said. When your allies pressure you to be harsh, remember mercy. When foreign powers offer compromises, remember sovereignty. When friends betray principles, remember justice. These aren't easy choices, Captain. They may cost you everything, but they're the only choices that lead to the future you're trying to build. We talked for another 30 minutes. He told me stories about Sankara, about the pressures he faced, about the compromises he refused, about the price he paid. And he told me something I didn't know. Sankara had also had dreams in his final months. Dreams warning him of betrayal, of assassination, of the collapse of his revolution. He knew what was coming, Father Emanuel said, and he chose to stay faithful anyway. He chose to die rather than compromise. I'm not saying you need to become a martyr, Captain. But I am saying you need to be willing to lose everything rather than betray everything. That's what discipleship means, and yes, I know you're Muslim, but the principle applies. Following truth, following justice, following God, it requires everything. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The confirmation was unmistakable. This hadn't been just a dream. Something real had happened. Whether it was Jesus himself or God working through my subconscious or some mechanism I didn't understand, it didn't matter. The message was real. The warnings were real. The choice was real. And I had to decide what I would do with it. The first test came exactly 2 weeks later, just as Jesus had predicted. My senior military officers requested an emergency meeting. They had intelligence, they said, of plots against the government, opposition groups organizing, foreign agents infiltrating. They had a list of people who needed to be arrested immediately for national security. I looked at the list. It included journalists, activists, opposition politicians. Some I recognized as legitimate critics. Some I suspected were just people saying things my officers didn't like. These people are planning a coup, my security chief insisted. We need to act now, before they can organize. Strike hard, strike fast, show strength. This was it. The first temptation. The pressure to choose security over freedom, control over trust, fear over faith. I remembered Jesus' warning. They'll use the language of security and stability, but what they're really telling you is to choose fear over faith, control over trust, domination over service. No, I said. The room went silent. Captain, with respect, this is not the time for softness, one officer said. If we don't act, then we don't act, I interrupted. We monitor them, yes, we gather intelligence, but we don't arrest people for speech, for organizing, for criticizing us. That's what the old regime did. That's what we overthrew. We're not going to become them. You're making a mistake, my security chief warned. You're being naive. These people want to destroy what you've built. Maybe, I acknowledged. Or maybe they have legitimate concerns that we should address. Either way, we don't win by becoming tyrants. We win by actually serving people, by addressing their concerns, by proving through our actions that this revolution is real. They weren't happy. Some walked out in disgust. But I held firm. And over the following weeks, as I met with some of the people on that list, I learned that most weren't plotting against me at all. They were worried about specific policies, specific actions. They had legitimate criticisms, and by listening to them instead of arresting them, I made allies instead of enemies. I'd passed the first test. Barely, but I'd passed it. The second test came 4 months later. The French ambassador requested a meeting. He came with an offer: significant military aid, economic support, diplomatic recognition. France wanted to normalize relations with my government. But there were conditions. Not explicitly stated, but clear enough. I needed to moderate my rhetoric about French colonialism. I needed to allow French companies continued access to our mineral resources. I needed to stop challenging French influence in West Africa. This is an opportunity, my economic advisor said. We need the money. We need the support. We can't do everything alone. I remembered Jesus' warning. They'll offer you money, weapons, legitimacy, but in exchange, they'll want your soul. What exactly would we have to give up? I asked the ambassador directly. He smiled diplomatically. Nothing significant, just cooperation, partnership, mutual respect. Meaning? Meaning you stop calling France a colonial power, you stop nationalizing French-owned companies, you allow market access, standard terms for this kind of relationship. So we give up our sovereignty in exchange for aid, I said flatly. That's not how we'd characterize it, but that's what it is. I interrupted. You want us to stop fighting for our independence in exchange for you supporting us. That's not partnership, that's colonization with better PR. The meeting ended badly. France was not happy. Other Western nations followed France's lead in withholding recognition and aid. My economic situation became harder. My advisors questioned my judgment. But we found other paths. Other partners who wanted actual partnership, not neo-colonialism. It was harder. It took longer. But we maintained our dignity, our sovereignty, our right to determine our own future. I passed the second test, and it had cost me significantly. But I'd stayed faithful to the warning. The third test came 11 months after the dream. One of my closest allies, a man who'd fought beside me in the coup, was credibly accused of corruption, taking bribes from contractors, using his position for personal enrichment. Everyone told me to protect him. He's been loyal, they said. He fought for the revolution. One mistake shouldn't destroy him. If you abandon him, others will lose faith in your loyalty. I remembered Jesus' warning. The third temptation will be the hardest, because it will come from love. I called my friend in for a private meeting, confronted him with the evidence. He denied it at first, then admitted it, then begged me to overlook it. I've been with you from the beginning, he said, tears in his eyes. We've been through everything together. You're really going to throw me away over some money? My heart was breaking. But I remembered, you must choose justice over friendship. You must hold your allies to the same standards you hold your enemies. I love you like a brother, I told him, but you betrayed everything we fought for. You used the revolution to enrich yourself. I can't protect that. If I protect you, I prove that this was never really about principles. It was just about power changing hands. I stripped him of his position, referred him for prosecution, lost a friend, lost an ally, faced accusations of disloyalty, of being cold, of valuing principles over people. But I'd passed the third test, and in doing so, I'd sent a message. This revolution was real. No one was above accountability. Not my friends, not my allies, not me. It's been 2 years since that dream. Since Jesus appeared to me and warned me about 3 temptations, since Father Emanuel called to confirm it was real. I've been tested many more times since those first 3. New temptations, new pressures, new compromises. I haven't passed every test. I've made mistakes. I've fallen short. I've sometimes chosen security over freedom, pragmatism over principle, loyalty over justice. But I keep coming back to those warnings. I keep remembering what Jesus showed me, the path to tyranny that starts with small compromises, with telling yourself you're special, with believing that maintaining power is more important than serving people. And I keep choosing, imperfectly but sincerely, to try to follow the path he outlined, to choose service over domination, to refuse foreign interference even when it costs me, to hold myself and my allies accountable even when it's painful. Am I succeeding? I don't know. History will judge. But I know I'm trying. I know I'm asking the right questions. I know I'm heeding the warnings I was given. Whether those warnings came from Jesus, from God, from my own conscience, or from some combination I don't fully understand, they were true. They were necessary. And they may have saved me from becoming the very thing I fought against. That's worth more than any amount of power, any length of time in office, any place in history books. I was warned. I was shown the path to tyranny and the path to service. And every day, I wake up and choose which path to follow. That choice never ends. The temptations never stop. But neither does the guidance, if I'm willing to listen. That's what the dream taught me. That's what Jesus warned me about. And I'm still trying, still choosing, still hoping I can stay faithful to the end.